You are very welcome to this video. In today's video I'm going to look at designing my first piece, my first useful piece. This was something I did to practice sewing and cutting and all the other things I needed to do, and so I thought today I would practice, well, I wouldn't practice, I would actually design my first useful piece. Now, I had been thinking about doing a sheath, a cover for this knife, and Andy left a comment in one of the videos saying I should do a cover, a sheath for this knife. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, I have designed things before in the past, but never for leather, never for clothing, never for that type of thing. It's been woodworking projects, metalwork projects, and believe it or not, IT projects as well, where I've designed user interfaces. So I know a little bit about the idea of design, but not for leather. So what I thought I would do is I would look at 2 or possibly 3 methods of designing in this video. The first one is, of course, this comes with this cardboard sheath. So basically I can take this cardboard sheath, add 3mm to each side and to the bottom, and that would be perfect. Now, and it would fit exactly as it's supposed to fit. Okay, you need the 3mm on the bottom and the 2 sides for the stitching line. Okay, that's the reason. Now 3mm is about 1/8 of an inch. I'd probably do it as 1/8 of an inch because 1/8 of an inch is just slightly more than 3mm. So I could do that. So that's the first one. The second way is to get a piece of paper and quite literally just wrap it around the item like that, and then make a mark here. That would tell me how big the top and bottom part would need to be, but of course you need to add 3mm. Now this paper is actually in 5mm squares, so in doing so I could actually just add the 5mm, and that would give me something to cut off. So that's 2 ways of doing it. And of course the third way is that you might not have something so easy to make a cover for, or that. So you need to do the hard way, which was to make some various measurements. So I thought I would do it the hard way simply because, well, that's the hard way. Now, as it's being made in China, I would assume that this is in metric. So let me just check. 3.5 centimeters by, that's not going to go right to the end, by about 6.5 centimeters. Let's just try that just in case in inches, just in case it is in inches. It's 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 5/16 by the looks of things there. So we'll go with the millimeters. So that's 3.5. So just write that down. 3.5. I should really do it in metric, shouldn't I? Does that go to the end? Oh, it does. That would be easier if I use this one, because it actually does go to the end, and so I could actually run it along that edge there. So that gives me 62, 63 So 63 millimeters by 35 millimeters. Now that's the size of the blade, and we then need the height, which is 2 millimeters. Okay, so that's 2 millimeters, and we need that times 2 because it's both sides. So all we now need to do is a little bit of mathematics, basically, because that's the size of the blade, but we haven't actually looked at how big the stitching line is, so we have to add 3 millimeters to each side. Now, just to check, if I put that in there, okay, that's quite a tight fit. It is actually quite a tight fit. So that, between the stitching lines, is 42, that's 42 mil, just so I know. I'll make a note of that. That's 42 mil. Okay. Now, here, okay, it's suggesting that I have 39 millimeters because it's 35 millimeters wide and 2 millimeters high, so 39 millimeters. Now that being 42, there is a little bit of movement, okay, not much, but there is a little bit. Now of course the blade isn't straight, which doesn't help matters. Now the next question is, do I need to put some sort of clip over the side? And I don't think I need to. I don't think I need to put something over the side, some sort of strap or whatever to hold it down. Now the next problem we've got with this is because the cutting edge is right at the bottom, if we put in a welt or something like that, it's just going to go underneath the welt. It's not actually going to hit the welt. As such, it will just go underneath. Or if you do it that way, it will go on top. It doesn't really matter which way. So putting a welt in probably won't help. Okay, the welt is just a little fillet of leather in between the two to protect. So what I really need to do is I need to add probably 2 millimeters to the length of this to give it some space at the bottom so it doesn't actually touch the stitching. So it's about there instead. Okay, so it doesn't touch the stitching. And I also need to give it a little bit of space, okay, when you go in, because as I say, that is just a little bit too much. Now it's probably 2 millimeters too much. So to make this easy, 35 plus 4 is 39 plus 1. So if I make it 40, right, between the stitch lines, okay, and 65 between the top and the bottom stitch line, so that tells me where the stitch lines should be, and I need to add 3 millimeters either side. So to me that seems like a good idea. And so now all I'll do is I'll use this square paper to actually design the item. Now I need 2 pieces. I need a front and I need a back. Okay, and I need to remember to add the 6 millimeters to the side, but 3 millimeters only to the bottom. Okay, now in theory, okay, I could just draw it out onto one of these squares and say, okay, instead of adding 3 millimeters to the bottom, I can use 5 millimeters. That would help. It would give me a bit extra at the bottom, so that if at any time this starts to bend or whatever, there's still a bit of space left to go, but I would prefer it to be a bit closer. And of course, adding the 3 millimeter stitch line to either side will take that up to 46. Now this would be in 45. Now I could, I suppose, do that, but let's just have a quick look. Okay, so we'll start here. We need, as I say, 40 plus 6, so that's 46. So that would take us from there to there. So I'll just make a mark, and then turning it all round, we need 65 plus 3, which is 68, which would take us to there, 68. Okay, so all I need to do, oops, I've already made a mistake, 68, yes, so 68 is actually there. Okay, so I now need to just make sure that this line here, okay, is 46. So if I now draw that, and just double checking the measurements at the same time to make sure it's exactly right. I do apologise for that noise, and we'll check that, 46. So very easily, that is my template, and I need 2 of them. Okay, so now what I will do is I'm just going to transfer that to a piece of card and then cut it out. But before I do, let's just check. If we put the knife on here, okay, you can see I've got about 5 millimeters, approximately 4.5 millimeters each side. Okay, and the length is about right as well. Okay, it's actually coming to the 5 millimeter point, which will give me 2 millimeters before the stitching line. So I've double checked and everything is hunky-dory. So now all I need to do is cut out a cardboard template. Right, I've got myself a piece of card. We keep old delivery boxes. I think this one was probably Amazon. So I've got myself a piece of card, and I'm now going to transfer this onto the piece of card. Now I only need one of these because they're identical. There's no difference on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the awl, okay, and I'm literally going to just poke a hole at each corner, and if I can poke 4 holes correctly, I've now transferred that pattern onto here. Now you can do the same thing with any pattern, just at any corner or any bend or whatever. You just poke a hole through onto whatever you're going to use as a template. Now we in the Madoga kit we got this, which will be very, very useful for designing and cutting. You're actually supposed to be able to cut on this, and I have, but I notice it doesn't heal very well, so I'm going to use it more for designing and drawing, and I will do the cutting on this very cheap board that I bought from the supermarket. And as I say, so I now have that, so let's just draw a line. Now I could quite simply just cut this, but I'm a little bit OCD and I want to make sure it's actually correct. So I'm going to draw a line. Now, one of the things I've been told is you should never draw on leather. You should usually just use an awl on leather. Now, I'm not too sure. I've seen people draw on leather and so on. So I know it happens. And these people are much better at leathercraft than I. But some of the old professionals, rather than the young professionals, say don't draw on leather. So I'm going to follow their example as much as I can, because often, not always, often those who are a little bit older have a little bit more wisdom. Now, because I've actually cut this exact, marked this exact, there's actually no room for trimming, or very little room for trimming on this, because it is actually very close to the size. Okay, when you put it in like that, it's going to be, there we are, it's going to be very close to the size that's actually needed. So there's very little room for trimming on here. Okay, and I actually do have to be careful at the bottom, because there's only 2 millimeters of space when it's actually in there. So although 2 millimeters is sufficient, and if you actually look at this, you can actually see that if you move it slightly, there's only about 1 millimeter on that piece of card there. So in theory it should be sufficient. So I'm going to cut on the outside of each line. Okay, so I'll line it up on the line and then cut on the outside of each line. Has that gone through? Seems to have. And of course, what this also does is give me a double check that my measurements are correct. On this. And finally, see, that was a good one. There we go. Just a tad further up. Now, is that going to pop out? It is. So, there we have it. It's, let me just get rid of that. If I leave that there, I'm going to lose it, so let's put it all away. I learnt a long time ago that if I don't put things back, I lose them. I'm very good at that, so there we are. It is 68 by 46. So that is the exact size. Now, when I actually mark this on the leather, and we'll do that later, I'm going to have I'm not going to put the awl in, I'm not going to do it, it's difficult to show you, like that, okay? I'm actually going to do it like that, which will give me probably about 0.5 millimeter on each edge. Okay, so I shall be slightly big, and that will give me a little bit of room just to sand the edges, just to make sure that they're flat. But now that I have this, I need 2 of them. I shall mark it and write on it what it is, and that is part 1. I'd like to know what you think. I mean, should I have done it like this, or should I have just copied that quite literally and added the size to it, the sheath that it comes with? I mean, if I put the sheath that it comes with on, you can actually see that I'm slightly bigger than the sheath that it comes with. So in theory I have sufficient room for my stitch lines all the way around. I might actually make it another millimetre longer when I cut it, just in case. Should I have made it by folding the paper over? How should I have done it? What do you think? So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit the like button and subscribe, not forgetting to press the bell icon for more. If you didn't, please hit the dislike button and tell me why in the comments below. It's always useful to know why. You don't have to. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links to my Ko-fi and Patreon pages below. On the Patreon page you can get early access to the videos and access to the patterns and exclusive videos. I will actually put this pattern on my Patreon page as well. So although it's very easy, you saw how it is made, if you want this pattern, I'll put it on the Patreon page, and I may even create a second pattern with a strap as well. Okay, and I'll see you very soon for another how-to video, i.e. part 2, where I cut the leather and produce the sheath.